This podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Nothing stated on it, either by its hosts or any guests, is to be construed as psychological, medical, or legal advice. You're listening to Adoptees On, the podcast where adoptees discuss the adoption experience. I'm Haley Radke. Today, guest host Lisette Austin speaks with Annalisa Toccara, the co-founder of the UK organization Adoptee Futures. Annalisa shares about the complexities of her relationship with her adoptive family and her experience coming out of the fog. Lisette and Annalisa also discuss grief and loss. They've both lost an adoptive parent within the last year or two. Annalisa talks about the loss of her adoptive mother in 2021, what the grieving process has been like for her, and the profound gifts at the core of the journey. I also want to let you know there are brief mentions today of a suicide attempt and a death by overdose in this episode. We wrap up with some recommended resources for you, and as always, links to everything we'll be talking about today are on the website adopteeson.com. Let's listen in.
I am so pleased to welcome to Adoptees On, Annalisa Toccara. Welcome, Annalisa.
Hi.
Great to have you here. I can't wait to talk with you and hear your story. So why don't we just jump in right there and have you start by sharing some of your story with us?
I'm Annalisa Toccara. I am 34 years old. I'm from the UK. I was adopted when I was 4, but placed for adoption when I was 1 year old. So I had a foster family beforehand. I guess in standard terms, my adoption story is quite plain and boring. There's nothing really kind of special, so to speak, about my adoption. I think in recent years, it's something that I've been exploring a lot more since coming out the fog. But prior to that, kind of just, just a standard boring adoption. That's probably a bit about me.
Well, maybe tell us a little bit, was it a closed adoption, and just some of the details around, when did you find out you were adopted? Those kinds of things. So how did you feel about it? You said, coming out of the fog was later maybe, but what was it like for you growing up?
So growing up, I have always known I'm adopted. I actually have a sister who's also adopted. So different biological parents, but both adopted. And so for me, I've always, known that I was adopted. When I was at school, when I was in year 3, so I would have been sort of 5, 6, the kids used to bully me for being adopted. It was kind of seen as the lurgy, and the boys would make fun out of it. So my mum said to me, because I came home from school crying, and my mum was like, don't ever tell anybody else that you're adopted. And I literally didn't. So up until I was probably late 20s, nobody around me, apart from friends who I was close to, but nobody knew I was adopted because I didn't tell anybody. And little did I know that actually has had a massive impact on my life, because for me, I guess adoption's kind of been a bit of a secret. And so, growing up, having another sister who's also adopted presented its challenges, in the sense that we very much came from adoption at that point from 2 different angles. So I was very comfortable in my adoptive family. I felt safe. I felt secure. It was never something I questioned. I knew the background to why I was adopted. So my adoption was closed, but I had in the sense that it was closed with the contact with the birth family. But I knew all my details. So I had a file that explained why I was adopted. Both my birth parents had mental health problems. And so that's why I was put into foster care. And so I've known all of that from a very young age. My sister, on the other hand, she was adopted a couple of years later. And obviously, I'm not going to talk about her story, but her story is also quite interlinked with mine. So whenever I talk about me, I always end up talking about her. But I actually chose my sister. So we went to visit my foster family, and I was probably about, maybe 5 or 6 at this time, I think. And we visited my foster family, and there was this little girl there. And I said to my adoptive mum, I was like, I want her to be my sister. And that's literally what happened. So we adopted my sister, and my sister never felt comfortable in our family. And so growing up, it was really interesting because I had one experience of adoption. she had a completely different, and we used to argue quite a lot. And it's only kind of in the last couple of years that me and her have kind of come to a really good place of understanding, and I kind of understand her side of adoption now. But I guess I was very much, thinking, that I'm in a great family. But for me, that presented its challenges, I guess, because I never really, after the age of sort of 18, 19, I had difficulties with my adoptive family. My sister ended up leaving home at the age of 15, which caused its own problems in itself. And so I felt quite alone, really, going through that period. And my adoptive parents didn't understand me. I didn't understand them. I didn't understand why I was the way I was. And so that caused a lot of depression, a lot of anxiety, trigger warning, but I tried to take my life at that point. And so I've had quite a lot of various experiences through that. And so I've kind of lived with the depression. When I say kind of, I have lived with depression, severe depression, for quite a long time. And it's only kind of in the last couple of years, since coming out of the fog, that I'm kind of understanding who I am in relation to adoption. So I never thought that adoption had affected me in the slightest. And then I discovered Adoptee Twitter. And so it's really through Adoptee Twitter that I became enlightened to my experiences of being adopted. And so for me, the whole experience of meeting other adoptees on Twitter has been absolutely beautiful in kind of validating who I am. And then I discovered The Primal Wound, the book. So of course that kind of opened up my eyes a bit. But yeah, so that's kind of just a bit, I guess, about my story in itself, minus quite a lot of detail.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm sorry, you had gone through such a difficult period. So thanks for sharing openly about that. And, I really relate to you about the feeling like, this is fine. I'm placed in the right place, or, it's all just fine. So I am one of the ones also who was more like that. Interestingly, I'm kind of a merge, though, of you and your sister, because I ran off at age 15 and left, causing a lot of drama, but did not equate that with my adoption experience at all. And similar to you, had very difficult, period as a young adult, or becoming a young adult. But yeah, so did you look a lot like your adoptive parents? Was that part of why you felt like it could just remain under wraps? Did people, once you stopped talking about it, people didn't ask, didn't think? You never had that experience?
No, so I look nothing like my adoptive parents, but I do look very much like my sister. I don't see it personally, but like literally everybody I know, anytime I share a photo of me and my sister together, everyone thinks that we are biological because we apparently look the same. But no, I don't look anything like my parents. My adoptive parents they're both Jamaican, Black Jamaican. I'm mixed race and very light skinned compared to my adoptive mum and dad. But my adoptive mum and I, we did share the same, we've both got like a genetic birthmark on our hip. And so when I was younger, it was in exactly the same place, exactly the same shape. And so I used to think that's well cool, because I was like, we're not genetically attached,
Wow.
but yet we've got the same birthmark. And I'm not even kidding, like the exact same birthmark, exact same space. And so my mum and I, it was quite a special thing. I found it quite kind of, for me, connected me to my parents, to my mum. But there were moments when we were together where people would do like a double take. So I probably noticed it more as a teenager, or even kind of in my early 20s, maybe not younger. But there was a moment where my parents were both Christians and we went to church. And I remember this woman coming up to us, and my mum introduced me to this woman as her daughter. And this woman just kind of looked at my mum, looked at me again, looked back. And like, she was like, "This is your daughter." And I knew like instantly she was thinking, why is she so light skinned, like compared to my mum? And because obviously they know my dad as well. And and at that point, my mum looked really uncomfortable, and I wanted to say I'm adopted, and I didn't. But that's probably the only time I can physically remember awkwardness. I don't know. I just always felt really like bonded to my mum and dad.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's so interesting too, just how your experience was one where you could have been questioned about it, but you really weren't, except for that one really awkward time. So you just didn't really talk about it. Where I looked, my adoptive father was Black, my adoptive mother was white, mirroring what my biological parents are. And people wouldn't believe me. I would tell people I was adopted and they would be like, no, you're not. No, I'd be like, yes, I am. They're like, no. So it's just interesting, all these different experiences that we have.
Yeah.
But that connection with the birthmark that you had is really interesting.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you and your adoptive mom were really close.
We were close.
Or you had moments of being close, yeah.
Moments of being close, yeah. And actually, I was trying to think about this recently, because I guess my memory, so my mum's died, and I guess my memory of my mum is probably not as, I can't remember the nice moments. So I can't remember kind of the positive moments growing up, which is something that has intrigued me since her death and kind of navigating the grief of that. But I know that at one point I must have been very close to her. But yeah, so it's something that I'm kind of been thinking about quite a bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I mentioned that because you had mentioned feeling really bonded. And I think that's really interesting, but you're right, that doesn't necessarily equate closeness. But for whatever reason, you felt a part of and you felt very bonded. So there was something that had been positive and healthy for you in that way. But yeah, let's talk a little bit about this, because this is actually, part of what we wanted to talk about today was losing either, an adoptive parent. I lost my adoptive father in the end of 2020. And I know you lost your adoptive mother in 2021. So I'm sorry for your loss. I just wanted to know, you've already hinted at it, but there's been a lot that's come up since she's passed. Can you share a little bit about your journey with losing your adoptive mom? Yeah,
of course I am. And sorry, this is probably the first time that I'm going to talk about it, obviously, on a podcast. So if I'm a bit emotional, when my mum was first diagnosed, I wasn't really having a great relationship with her at that time. And so for the last kind of 3 years, she was struggling or fighting cancer. And our relationship was quite fractured, purely because in my late 20s, I started coming out of the fog and kind of discovering things about myself, about adoption, opening my eyes to kind of different adoptees' experiences. And so I would share that with my mum. We'd get into arguments. She would kind of take it personally. So I remember this distinctly. I was on a train coming home from work one day, and I can't remember what prompted this discussion, but I was on the phone to her and I was saying how adoption is always the last choice for people. It's never the first choice. And so I was just coming out of the fog, I guess, at this point. And she kind of took that personally, because she was trying to say, well, are you not thankful for being adopted? And she just really took it to heart. And I was like, no, I'm just saying that as adoptees, we're always chosen last. Like, we're not the first choice. We're a backup plan. And she didn't understand it. And that, I think for me, that conversation was the moment I was like, there is something wrong with adoption, but I can't quite pinpoint what is wrong with it. And so the more I kind of discovered about me, the more I started speaking to other adoptees, I was like, whoa, there is a lot wrong with adoption. And so I would share that with my mum, bearing in mind she was diagnosed with cancer at this point. And so it just kind of tore our relationship further and further apart. By the time her health started deteriorating even more at the start of 2021. And by June, she died. And so I watched her kind of gradually die. I live 2.5 hours from her, so I would travel up and down. And the last kind of week was really special. Definitely the night before, I had a really special moments with my mum that week. And it was really weird. And I think since then it's been really odd kind of navigating that, because we had such a tense relationship in the last kind of 5 or 7 years, maybe 10 years. And so when she did die, I was like, why am I upset? Like, which sounds bizarre because, that's your mum. Like, you should be upset, or well, maybe you shouldn't be. But I was like, I couldn't understand why I was upset. Like, obviously I was upset, but I couldn't work out why my feelings why I was grieving somebody that I never really had a relationship with or felt that I had a relationship with in sort of the last 10 years, if that makes any sense. And so I think I'm kind of, my upsetness is probably to do with, obviously I miss her like deeply, but at the same time I'm also like, but we didn't have a great relationship, so what is it that I'm missing? And I think that's what I'm kind of grappling with at the moment is, am I grieving the potential of being close with somebody that I was never close to, if that makes sense? Or am I actually grieving my mum? Because I know that at some point, my mum and I had a really great relationship. And at some point, that relationship disappeared. And so it's like I feel like I'm grieving quite a lot of different things at the same time. And so to kind of navigate all of this is really interesting. And alongside this, I've also made contact with my birth family for the first time. So my mum died in June. By maybe, was it October? I think I got in contact with my birth family for the first time, went on Ancestry DNA, discovered that my birth mum died when she was 28, literally from the trauma of me being separated from her, and she overdosed. And so I think it's it's really interesting because I'm going through various different griefs. So not just my adoptive mum, but then my birth mum at the same time, which is weird because obviously she died years ago. So yeah, I think it's interesting.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. That's a lot. And I was finding myself feeling really emotional listening to you because I relate so much to, I think like as an adoptee too, like just all these complicated layers and the grief opening the door, the grief of someone that important, whether you've been close as of late or not, they were still this first person who, like you initially said, there was a sense of some kind of bonding and they were who took care of you. And also that grief of what could have been and what happened and now they're gone. But it also is like this doorway that opens up all the loss. Mm-hmm. And then I share with you the experience of like around the time of my adoptive father's death, I had actually found my biological Black family here where I live, not intentionally doing it around this time. My father's death was a surprise. I mean, he was quite old. He had heart failure. It wasn't really a surprise, but it happened very quickly and sort of he seemed fine and then he wasn't. But I found my birth family 9 months before he passed away. So there was a lot going on. It was like finding people, losing people. And I was very close to my adoptive father in particular. He and I shared a very special relationship. And so I relate to just like, because with the finding comes loss. You know, it's like, and then you literally also found out you had lost your birth mother. Mm. I'm so sorry for that loss as well. I didn't have that exact experience, but I find that even with people being here, it just highlights how much I missed, you know?
Yeah. And I think that's what I've realized as well. It's so like my biological uncle, he, we've been in communication. I've been in communication with biological family. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I've missed out on quite a lot. I've spoken to my biological dad. And so, yeah, it's that kind of, I've lost a family, but I've gained a family at the same time. So it's a lot of different feelings that I'm kind of going through. And so, yeah, I'm kind of like navigating through that and working out, okay, where do I belong now? Because I don't feel I belong in my adoptive family. And with my mum dying, my mum was kind of the glue to the family as well. So it's like, I've not just lost my mum. I mean, I'd lost my adoptive family years ago, but now it's kind of that reality. No, I actually have lost my adoptive family. So even though my dad is there, my sister's there, but we're not close. My mum was kind of that person who would bring us together, and same with the extended family. And so now I'm like, wow, okay. But then at the same time, I've gained a biological family, but then it's like, okay, but I don't really fit into their family either. And I have to make that, start building those relationships. And I'm really rubbish at kind of relationship building. I network quite a bit with people, but in terms of actually keeping solid relationships, it's not a great strong point of mine. So yeah, it's interesting.
Yes. Well, and then, the grief bringing up, I'm sure. I mean, I'm out of the fog maybe 3-4 years now, and I'm 52 now. So I went a long time. Not that I didn't think it didn't matter, but I'm way more tuned in. And just that idea too of the loss triggering the original loss also, like way back, pre-verbal, I believe that. Yeah. I believe that. And I think I don't know what it's been like for you. I'd love to hear about your self-care practices, but I will also say for me, I've found some healing aspects to the grief journey, or rather, let me say, some integrating aspects or stripping away aspects. You know what I mean? Where I feel like the light is being shown on what actually matters. Can you share a little bit about maybe either like what has been positive that has come from this experience and how you've navigated it?
Yeah. So in one word, freedom. Like I have felt so free since my mum died, which again sounds bizarre, but friends have said to me that I've changed like since my mum died. And I think it's because I've I guess, in a weird way, come into my own. It's like there was so much that I felt kind of bound by the loyalty, the not wanting to upset my mum, just so much that I felt I was kind of obligated to do. And I still do in some sense feel obligated. But I think I've kind of come into my own, and I think I'm learning how to kind of stand on my own 2 feet. So like my parents I've never relied on them in that sense since I was probably like 23. But I always knew they were there as kind of a backup in case things in my life went drastically wrong and I needed them. But like I said, my mum was the glue. And so with her going, I've realized that I don't have that kind of family unit, like definitely there. I knew I could ring my mum and be like, tell her something. And we might not agree, but I knew she was there. I don't have that same relationship with my adoptive dad. And I think, again, that was something that was really special when my mum was dying, because, again, I don't have a great relationship with my dad. But during that period, say, I went home, I went to live with my dad for about probably 6 weeks. I was at home for maybe 8 weeks. I was with him during that period. And we built a really special connection, or I felt we built a really special connection compared to what we had previously. And it was just nice being there, being kind of feeling like a belonging. But then I moved back home, back up north to Sheffield, and things changed because obviously my dad is going through his own grieving process, and he sold our family home and all sorts of stuff. And so I realized that I didn't have that kind of same, unit that I might have had with my mum. And so I think it's made me kind of awaken more to kind of, okay, Annalisa, like you need to start getting your together. You need to kind of focus on you. And like my parents have always said to me, focus on yourself. I can sometimes care about people more, my friends or my sister more than myself, right? My dad's always been like, Annalisa, you need to be focusing on you, not focusing on other people, focus on you. And this whole period has taught me that. And so my self-care practices, for example, I booked my first holiday alone in December, and unconsciously ended up booking it on the 6-month anniversary of my mum dying. Also, her birthday was the next day. And there was something else, can't remember what. And it was really bizarre because I hadn't planned to go away on those dates. Those dates just happened. And I've never been away alone before because I've always struggled to be on my own. I've always felt I needed to be around people, whether or not I felt connected into them or not. I just couldn't be on my own. And so going away on my own for that, I went away first time for 4 nights. And that was like, oh, wow, I can do solo trips on my own. And that was a beautiful experience for me. And then since then, I've done another 2 holidays on my own. Got a bit obsessed, I think, because I've now started planning like 3 more holidays this year on my own. But that has been a massive self-care experience for me, just knowing that I can do things like this on my own. So, yeah, like I said, I think for me, it's been freedom. I just feel so free and kind of more at peace with learning who I am as an adoptee, but as Annalisa, like, you know, and I don't think I've ever really felt me, if that makes sense. I feel like I've always been kind of trying to be somebody I'm not, like trying to be my mum and dad's daughter, trying to be, you know, this career woman, trying to be this, trying to be that. But who am I? And I think that has been what I've kind of been discovering since my mum died. Like, who am I actually? So, yeah.
Wow, I love everything that you just shared. And I relate to the travel experience too, by the way. I'm a diehard traveler. So when you were like, and then I started solo traveling, I'm like, yes. But yeah, thank you so much. A lot of profound things that you shared. And, you know, I think I was thinking when you were sharing about how, yeah, I have friends who are not adopted, obviously. And I think there is something kind of global, perhaps, about when you lose a parent, you kind of come out from under their, I don't want to say shadow, but you have to step into, you know, they're gone and you have to step into your own self and parent yourself. But I think for adoptees, there's this whole other added component to that, you know, that you mentioned, that sense of obligation, loyalty. It's interesting. I actually had an irrational thought when my adoptive father passed. I was like, I killed him. I killed him because I went and found my bio dad. I remember thinking that. And I knew at the time it made no sense, but I think it went right to the core of that adoptee conundrum, you know, like I don't deserve to know who my other people are or something. So that, you know, and I got through that. That was some little young part of me, I think. But I think when you're sharing what you're sharing about freedom, I think you're so hitting it on the head. It's like, it's such a bittersweet, weird experience of losing people and at the same time recognizing that you're stepping into your own self a little bit more or a lot more.
A lot more.
So thank you for sharing that. Yeah.
I think as well, like, so the night before my mum died, me and her spent a really like connective moment together. And I think that also helped free me as well. So like she was unresponsive and she couldn't talk, but she could hear. And her breathing had changed quite a few times during that day. So like I knew, I could feel in my soul she was going to go the next morning. I knew when I woke up she was going to go. And so I kind of sat by her side and it was just really, really peaceful in our living room and the lights were turned down low. And I was just like holding her hand and talking to her and crying because I was like, what am I going to do without you? Even though I've been living my life without her for so many years. And it was funny because when she was alive, we joked about that like a couple of weeks before she actually died, because I was like, I don't want you to go. And she was like, well, you've never needed me. And it was like this funny moment. But anyway, when I was like next to her and I was saying to her, like, I'm really sorry for this and I'm sorry for that. And it was weird. Like she cried, like she was unresponsive, but a tear fell out of her eye and I like wiped it. And it was just this beautiful, like, and bonded moment. And I'll never forget that. But I think for me, like being able to tell her exactly how I felt and get that all off my chest, it was like, I've got no regrets. So like, she's gone and I've said everything that I could say to her, like the good, the bad. Do you know what I mean? I've got no regrets. I said everything to her. So it's like I've got that kind of freedom because, you know, and like, I do think that she would be really proud, like how I've been kind of navigating the last kind of couple of months, you know? So, yeah. Sorry,
Yeah.
you're crying.
No, we're both crying right now. We're both crying. So that's really touching and really powerful to hear about. And I think she is proud of you, I'm sure. And I know that sense of no regret, I struggled with that at the beginning after my dad died. Like, oh, I should have done this and this could have happened or maybe that. And that's strange, irrational. Like, why did I have to find my birth father? You know, I didn't even talk to him about it that much. We didn't have a chance. But what you just said, I realized I had my own moment of that too. Like, thank God I took my adoptive dad traveling so much like we did. And thank God we had all these meals. And thank God I told him all the time, every time we talked, love you, you know. And so, yes, that's a freedom too, knowing like, hey, I did everything I could and I said what I needed to say. And so I'm glad you had that really healing time with her. That's powerful. Thank you so much for sharing that. All right. We're going to take a breath. Okay. So you've shared about some of your self-care practices. Before we go to recommended resources, do you have any maybe final bits of advice for adoptees navigating a big loss, which surely opens up the doors to other grief and losses. Any final thoughts or words you want to share about that?
Probably take your time and realize that it's not linear. So, like, I think for me, something that really aggravated me was just like the moments of, why am I crying? Like, I was getting really frustrated, and I have a like a life coach, and so she deals in trauma. So I was going to her. I mean, we're still doing our sessions actually, but in kind of the immediate aftermath of my mum dying, I was saying to her, like, why am I crying? I don't understand why I'm so upset. I don't understand these feelings. And I think it is that moment to like allow yourself to cry, like it's okay, and like recognize that at some point that, like, you know, these things will hit you. There are moments where like I'll be talking about something or somebody will say something to me and it just triggers like a memory, or it triggers something, and then tears well up. And I could be in a work meeting and then I'm like, and because we've all been doing it by Zoom, I just turn my camera off and like have a moment to myself to cry. But yeah, take time, and healing, it's not linear. Healing's not linear, and there might be periods of grief running in and out, and recognize that as well. And yeah, give you space to heal through that.
Thank you. Yeah, that's beautiful. Thanks for sharing that.
Oh, and one more thing. I am about to do a PhD in journalism studies, looking at adoption from the perspective of adoptees on Twitter. So it's going to be a critical analysis discourse of obviously adoption, because one thing I've realized when kind of coming out of the fog and looking at the different narratives of adoption is how kind of we have this dominant adoption ideology that is adoption is beautiful, but then we don't really talk about the adoption is trauma side. And so I really want to look into that. And because I kind of discovered more about myself through Adoptee Twitter, I was like, wait, no one's researched on this yet. Let me research on it. So when my mum died, and I just think it's really funny because my mum always wanted me to do a PhD, and we argued so much about it because I was like, I don't want to do one. There's no point. I don't want to go into academia. And so when she died, literally probably like 3 weeks after she died, I was like, all right, let me do a PhD. And so I wrote my proposal. I did it in 2 weeks, almost made myself sick. Wrote the proposal, applied, and then I found out I got in just before Christmas. And I thought it's well funny because she'd be really proud that I'm doing a PhD. She wouldn't like the topic that I'm doing it on though. And so like, it just makes me laugh. But yeah, I'm just really interested in kind of how we can look at sort of adoption, but look at the birth of Adoptee Twitter and how we were all kind of taking back our narratives and owning that narratives. And then another thing that I'm doing as well is I'm actually writing a book on adoption, the UK adoption, and looking at kind of narratives and, again, narratives, communication, and kind of adoption experiences. So that's something to look out for soon as well.
Wow, you are doing a lot of amazing things. So I'm so glad that you mentioned all of that. I know I definitely will be following you myself at this point. So I can't wait to see what all evolves from your work and your study and everything in your book. Okay, so let's move into recommended resources. I think I'll start with mine. I have a book that I really appreciated getting from, it was actually one of my web design clients sent it to me because I had to tell her that I was not functioning properly. I was trying to build her website and I said, I really need more time. My adoptive dad just died. And she said, what's your address? And she sent me this book because she had just actually lost her dad 2 months before and then her sister and during that time. So she sent me this book called Healing After Loss by Martha Hickman. And it's been around since the 1990s. I hadn't heard about it, but it's just one of those beautiful little daily readers. So very easy to take in because it was just one little page at a time. And I would read it every morning and it literally felt like it was saving me because it's so beautifully written and acknowledges so many things. And I just literally, it became like this thing I had to do every day was read that book. And I dog-eared like every page. So it was kind of almost ridiculous. Like I pick it up now and it's like just a bunch of dog ears in the corner. It's like, wait a minute, the whole book's great. So that's my recommended resource. So that's Healing After Loss by Martha Hickman. I know it's not adoptee specific, but I just feel like anybody who's going through a big loss would benefit from it. So that's mine. Do you want to share your recommended resource?
Yeah, of course. So mine is The Joy of Being Selfish by Michelle Ellman. And so this book came out last year. It's about setting boundaries and why you need them and how to set them. And I think it's not adoptee specific, but I do think that as adoptees, we struggle potentially with kind of being able to set boundaries because of the whole loyalty thing, not just with our adoptive parents, but maybe with everybody. And so for me, setting boundaries has been something that I've really, really had to try and come to grips with. And so, because naturally I'm a people pleaser, but I think being adopted, and this is the thing, so I've always been a people pleaser, but never related it to adoption. And then when I came out the fog, I was like, oh my God, like that just makes complete sense now, why I do certain things. And so the book talks about how to set boundaries, why we need to set them, but it also gives really good kind of little copy, little pieces of text for setting boundaries. So if someone sends you a message and they want to go out for dinner, but actually you don't want to, it's got like a really great kind of, this is what to say. And so it's become like my little Bible, especially with dating as well. So again, dating, massive issue. My love life is a mess, always has been a mess. And so it's really great for like, you know, getting what you deserve or believing that you deserve certain things and just kind of giving you practices on what you can say to people, how you can get rid of kind of toxic relationships. So that's probably that is my resource.
Love it. Okay, excellent. And of course, we'll have links to these resources in the show notes. Where can people connect with you online? Would love to know about that if people want to reach out and connect with you.
Yeah, of course. So my personal Twitter is Anna Toccara. Connect with me there, or on Instagram, which is Annalisa Toccara. I also, and I haven't mentioned this and I probably should, but I run an organisation in the UK called Adoptee Futures. We are the first and only organisation in the UK that's run by adoptees, that centres adoptees. And so myself and my colleague Shania, we created Adoptee Futures last January, which really came out of both our experiences of adoption, but realising there were no services here to support adoptees, adult adoptees. And it's actually where I met Hayley. We met on Clubhouse, and that's how I discovered sort of the Adoptees On podcast as well. So, I mean, that in itself was a beautiful experience, just the Clubhouse and discovering other adoptees from around the world. And so, yeah, so Adoptee Futures, we do workshops. We're very much centred in trauma-informed healing, trauma-informed care, believing that adoption is trauma. And so you can find our website, which is www.adopteefutures.org, or on Twitter and Instagram, which is Adoptee Futures. So yeah, that's where you can find me.
Perfect. And yes, actually, when I was saying where can people connect with you, I was like, ooh, we need to have her describe this amazing, organization that is really pretty recent, but it just looks incredible from what I saw on the website, the description of it. Okay, well, this has been a really wonderful conversation. Again, thank you so much for coming onto the show and talking with me and sharing so openly about the complicated relationships, the loss, and the healing, because I hear a lot of that and the freedom that you're experiencing. So really appreciate you sharing with me today, Annalisa.
Thank you for inviting me on. Really, really loved it.
I'm so thankful that Annalisa and Shania are starting Adoptee Futures in the UK. There are some other great folks doing good work there, like Claire from How to Be Adopted as well is another resource available for adoptees in the United Kingdom. So make sure you check out the links. There's a growing group of connected adoptee advocates happening there right now. So it's a really exciting time for you. If you guys live over there and want to get connected, make sure you do that. I'm really also feeling grateful for the discussion of grief and the impact and sometimes the ways like it surprises you, when Annalisa was talking about like, oh, and I just started crying all of a sudden, like very relatable to me right now. I've not lost a human person, but I have lost my dog. I think I mentioned I did a little episode like, hey, where is the show? because my dog died and we had to euthanize her. She was 16 years old, my very best buddy. And I'm really still struggling with it. It's been a surprise to me how much it's impacted everything, like literally day-to-day function. And the time I'm recording this, I'm like, I don't know, 3.5 weeks out already. Like it's time. But I think having those prescriptive things about what grief should look like and like I should feel better by now, and it's not helpful because we all grieve differently. So I really appreciated that discussion. And as such, as I'm saying to you, I'm still really having a hard time. I'm kind of laughing about it because I'm uncomfortable. It's just been one thing after another here. I was in the ER last night for 5 hours with a kid who needed stitches. I have an injury, so sitting at my desk is really challenging right now. It's like been so hard. So once again, I'm going to skip a week and we'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode. And then we only have a few more episodes to go before summer break. So there will be a few more shows and then we'll have a full summer break. So I can chill out. You guys don't have to worry about my mental health every week to week. And we'll be back again, absolutely, with weekly episodes in the fall. So if you are craving more content in the meantime, there's hundreds of episodes of Adoptees On you can go back and listen to. And then there's also over 160 episodes on Patreon. If you want to join the community there, it's adopteeson.com/community. And we are reading a poetry book for this month for book club. This is The Journey by Allison Malie, which is so beautiful. If you're listening to this day of, tomorrow, we have a Patreon party, off-script party for adoptees only, where we kind of get together and just connect. We break out into small Zoom rooms and hopefully you'll find a new adoptee friend. And our theme is Bloom for tomorrow's party. And then later in the month, we have that book club meetup where it's on Zoom and we break out into small groups and discuss the poetry book. Both of those are not recorded, so you have to come live, and dates and times and all those things are available in Patreon. So adopteeson.com/community if you want to get more Adoptees On content. And that's how the show keeps going when I'm, well and able to do my work. So thank you so much for listening. Thank you also for all the folks that sent kind thoughts and messages and related to loss of a dog. Like, I'm so sorry that you've had to go through that too. Those things were a real encouragement to me. So I'm really grateful. And thank you for your patience with me. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode. And let's talk again then.